Support for WUWM podcasts comes from Potawatomi Casino Hotel Milwaukee, home to 24/7 excitement, dining, and an on-site hotel at 1721 West Canal Street. More information at potawatomi.com.
From 89.7 WUWM Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Today, in honor of 414 Day, we'll learn about the origins of the city's many neighborhood posters. Then the filmmakers of the new Uecker documentary share what it was like to work with the local legend, Bob Uecker.
There was no negative. It was kind of what you hoped it would be, that he was going to be this funny, bright, energetic guy, somehow at age 90, and he was that.
Plus, we'll learn how the Milwaukee Public Museum changed the way museums present information with the first diorama habitat.
This was really revolutionary in trying to create a teaching tool that allowed you to learn more just by looking at something.
All that's coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Thanks for joining us today. Today is 414 Day, so we'll be celebrating all the things that Milwaukee is best known for. And what would a celebration of Milwaukee be without a conversation with the city's own John Gerda? Gerda is perhaps best known as the chief historian of the city of Milwaukee. His documentary series and book, The Making of Milwaukee, have become vital resources in understanding the city's history. But Gerda's impact on Milwaukee has been broad and varied. In fact, his work can be seen in neighborhoods throughout the city, on lampposts, and in homes. John Gerda joins Lake Effect's Joy Powers to talk the city of neighborhoods and the posters that represent them.
One of the annual celebrations of 414 Day is a special deal on the posters for Milwaukee's neighborhoods. And it's my understanding that you are part of how these posters came to be. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a great project. This goes back to the late 70s. And it was, I think the name was Discover Milwaukee, became Spirit of Milwaukee for a time. But it was part of the Department of City Development under Henry Meyer and Bill Drew, and the office of Greg Coonan, of departed, of blessed memory. His idea was to highlight neighborhoods as kind of building blocks of the city. So I was hired as a contractor to, first of all, identify neighborhoods in Milwaukee, sort of map them, the ones that were identifiable, and then to write an essay about each of them, highlighting history and kind of character. And then work with a DCD artist named Jan Katowicz, who's the most widely seen artist you never heard of, or whose name you don't know, who would do these wonderful drawings of essentially architectural features, each of the neighborhoods. So Jan would do the front, I would do the back. We worked together on kind of what would be highlighted, bungalow in Sherman Park, water tower on the east side. It's a lot of fun. It's great to work with. So the result was a series of posters. I think we had 27 early on. And when they got published, they really took off. You'd see them in doctors' offices and broadcast TVs and interview rooms. You'd see them in the background on TV. But my essays on the back, if they were hung for display, those essays went away forever. It was like writing the back of a postage stamp and pasting it to an envelope. So what happened eventually was Historic Milwaukee Incorporated, which is now has the inventory of posters. They took them over, and they were the publisher of a book called Milwaukee City of Neighborhoods from 2018, I believe, that I worked on, again, with Jan. So Jan did, I think we added, 7 or 8 new ones, maybe 10. I'm not sure what we got up to. But it was a coffee table book called Milwaukee City of Neighborhoods that won a Gutenberg Award for Best Design among publishers back in that year. So finally, we had sort of the co-equal status of the posters and the words with a lot of pictures. And that became kind of a grassroots Bible. It's the closest thing we've had to kind of an encyclopedia of neighborhoods. And the city, in the meantime, was deciding that it would identify every square inch of the city as something named. I didn't go that far. The ones that were strong, it's like stars of certain magnitudes, 1 through 4. Some are brighter than others. So Bayview is real bright. Silver City maybe not quite so bright, although it's shining, more these days. So it changes. But there are areas that did not have a strong identification by name that I just chose to leave silent. But they've gotten a lot of publicity, a lot of usage. We're going on. So those posters are 30 years, 35, 40 years. But Jan's designs are pretty timeless.
They're beautiful designs. You'll even see them in neighborhoods on like flags, essentially.
Right.
How did you decide on the initial neighborhoods? What was it about each of them that, I don't know, gave that kind of community feel? How did you gauge that?
Boy, a lot of things, and it's not a science. And I think part of it was there are gimmies, like a Walker's Point, like a North Point, the Water Tower neighborhood. And then there are ones that are not so much, but then you have the ones that in many cases began with kind of social programs of some sort. Harambe Ombudsman Project, North Division Project. So they had kind of taken a slice and kind of in some ways institutionalized a character, so it made that official. So those were easy as well. And others, it's again like stars. They don't all shine equally brightly, but I did a lot of biking. I probably biked or drove down virtually every street in the city for that project. So I got to know the city about as well, probably better than a cab driver or an Uber driver. They didn't have them back then. So that it was a lot of fun. It was a hurry up project. I didn't have long to do each of those neighborhoods, 3-4 weeks. So it was research, writing, and then on to the next one, and then dealing with the design elements with Jan, wrestling with those design elements. But she was great to work with. So I have fond memories of that project, and turning that into a book, a 6.5 pound book, heavy reading. It was hazardous to carry around, but that was certainly very satisfying as well.
It's something that, in some ways, feels small, but also so large and unifying.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the goal of making these?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I think the goal for DCD and for me was to kind of raise up these grassroots communities and say that these are the building blocks of Milwaukee. This is who we are. And giving very consciously equal weight, equal time, equal words, equal pictures to the Lake Park neighborhood and to the near north side and near south side. The old socialist ideal, kind of we're all in this together. And I think giving equal treatment and highlighting them all kind of in the same graphic scale, I think makes that statement pretty powerfully.
Yeah. Now, this is definitely a part of your legacy, but I guess so much of your legacy here is very tangible, isn't it? Yeah, sure. I'm a product person. I like to make stuff. I mean, that in and of itself feels very Milwaukee.
I suppose, yeah.
As someone who works in telling the stories of other people, is legacy something that you think about for yourself?
For me, as I approach 80 in a couple of years, you can't help but think of legacy, kind of looking back. And what I feel, more than kind of what I've done that will last is just a sense of gratitude for having been able to do it for all these years. Not that many people get to do things that they would choose and do it for so many years. So I feel very lucky, very, very privileged to have done it for so long.
Do you view these posters as part of that kind of visible legacy through the city?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. The work is Jan's, but it was cooperative. But yeah, I was part of that project and very proudly. But other things, the Making of Milwaukee, both the book and the documentary series, I think those things, the doc came out in 2006 and they're still showing it on Channel 10. So it's had staying power. And we're working right now, the same team, on the Making of Black Milwaukee. So we're working on probably a 2-hour documentary about the history of African Americans in Milwaukee, which is a story that has not been told in sufficient depth and detail.
I'm excited about that. I hadn't heard about that.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Well, John, thank you so much as always for joining us.
My pleasure, Joy.
John Gerda is a local historian and the author of many, many books on the region, including Milwaukee, City of Neighborhoods, The Making of Milwaukee, and the Cream City Chronicles. He spoke with Lake Effect's Joy Powers. In honor of 414 Day, Historic Milwaukee is selling its neighborhood posters for just $4.14. You can find them at shop.historicmilwaukee.org.
Body and beats, I stain my sheets, I don't even know why. My girlfriend, she's at the end, she is starting to cry. Let me go on, like I blister in the sun, let me go on.
Bob Uecker is a local legend who seemingly did it all. He was a professional baseball player, Hall of Fame sportscaster, comedian, and actor. For decades, he made us laugh and kept us company on the radio and at the ballpark. Uecker passed away at age 90 in January of 2025. A new documentary, aptly called Ueck, is a testament to his continuing legacy. It gives audiences an intimate look into his life, work, family, friends, and what he meant to all the generations of people who knew his voice. It's made by Milwaukee-based filmmakers Michael Volman and Steve Farr, who will be at the premiere of Ueck at the Milwaukee Film Festival on opening night. Ahead of that, they join me now to share more about the doc. Steve and Michael, welcome to Lake Effect.
Thanks for having us, Audrey.
Thank you so much.
So before we get into the documentary, I would love to know what your first memories of Ueck were. Just as people living in the Milwaukee area, what about him stuck out to you and cemented him in your lives?
Well, I think for me it was, I'm a little bit older than Michael, so I actually remember when he appeared on The Tonight Show in the early 70s, and I can remember, my dad being aware that he'd be on, and I'd be able to, stay up late and watch Johnny Carson and seeing Uecker on that, and I was already kind of a big baseball fan, and I think I already knew it was kind of weird that the baseball announcer was on The Tonight Show, but that's probably my earliest memory.
How about for you, Michael?
Yeah, for me, definitely through baseball, through the Brewers. Growing up and really liking baseball. 1987, the Brewers went on some winning streaks, and I really got hooked. And when I was a kid, I would listen to every single radio broadcast pretty much. And one thing I used to do is I had a boombox with 2 tape cassette recorders in it, and I would try to record the ambient audio of Uecker, like of the crowd between Uecker's announcing, and then try to tape it to the other tape, so there'd be a string out of ambient audio, and I would then play it back and try to impersonate Uecker.
I love that. Now, this documentary, simply called Ueck, and appropriately, it was filmed over what turned out to be the last 3 years of Bob Uecker's life. How did it first come about, and was Bob an automatic yes? Did it take convincing?
Well, September Club is our company, and we had a development meeting probably late 2022, and we were looking for some ideas for a local documentary, something that could be done here in Milwaukee. And I don't know if it was you, Michael, or someone said, what about Uecker?
Yeah, I think, we'd all talked about it at some point. I think our co-producer and editor, Matthew Prekop, he's a big baseball fan as well. And I think I had mentioned it to him, and he was the one who actually brought it up. And, I almost felt like it was almost something that was just a dream project, and it almost seemed like unattainable thing to do. And then when he brought it up in September Club, Barry Polterman, producer, and Jeremy Kuhn, the producer, they were very much quickly on board. And
I had a connection with Bob Uecker, having done a PSA for ALS. I have a production company, Purple Onion, and we had done that during COVID, so I knew I could get through to him, or at least his people, and so he took the call pretty quickly. We arranged a meeting with him in Scottsdale in December of 2022. We flew down there, 4 or 5 of us, met with him. We thought it'd be like a hour-long lunch, and I think it ended up being closer to 4 hours. And at this point, he had kind of vetted us. And so I think he already had made the decision that, he wanted to work with us, but he probably wanted to.
It wasn't 4 hours because we had to convince him. It was 4 hours because he just
had a great time.
Yeah, we had a great time. He just kept telling us stories, and we were like, oh, try to save it for the documentary. We're gonna have to redo all these stories again.
But, making notes as you're having
lunch. It was hilarious, and we almost missed our flight home. But
sign of a good.
But that's where it started, and shortly after that we started filming, and we ran a number of scenarios past him, probably 10, 12 things that we hope to do over the next year or two, and he was on board with all of it. But unfortunately, fairly early on, he was also diagnosed, and he let us know that there weren't many people that knew about it, and he just said he would, continue to do what he could with us for the documentary and honor some of these things. But we weren't able to shoot everything that we wanted to, but that was fine. It was just amazing that he was still committed to doing it.
Absolutely. And Uecker was diagnosed with lung cancer during the 2023 season. And as you mentioned, just a few people knew. Yelich and his coworkers in the booth knew, and you guys were part of this very small group that knew. So outside of the impact that the news of this diagnosis had on you as humans, how did it factor into the film? How did it change your original direction?
Well, I think it was just we couldn't shoot all the things that we wanted to film. We had said, well, maybe we can go out fishing with you out on the lake. Sure, we can do that. Or we wanted to drive around Milwaukee. Like I said, there was a handful of things, and it just got to the point where we had to cherry pick a few of them and do them, squeeze them in when Bob was able to do it, because a lot of his spare time was having treatments or going to the doctors or resting up. But again, he honored as many as he could, which was amazing.
The two closest partners you worked with outside of Uecker himself was his family and the Brewers. What was it like to navigate those relationships?
I mean, it was a great experience. One of the things that you think about when you do start a documentary is access, and how much access are we going to get to Bob? And obviously we're going to be shooting at the stadium and the Brewers will be involved and the family. I think. When we started, it was kind of the Uecker trademark handshake deal, and we kind of started that way. And, I think we just kind of had that trust, and he trusted us throughout the process. And then, I think because he wanted to do it, the Brewers were on board. They kind of said, hey, if he wants to do this, we're definitely going to support you all the way. And, and then with the Uecker family after he passed, that's been a unique experience as well. Just navigating that, and it's definitely a difficult time for them to, be having to watch cuts and sort of just think about, replay all of that again. But really been supportive and encouraging, and we really appreciate it. We wouldn't have been able to make the film without all of their help.
Uecker was 90 when he passed. There's so much life that he lived and also so many careers. He had multiple careers that perhaps people know him for before associating him with baseball, especially if people are a little younger. And I think this kind of aligns with a quote you included from Bob where he said, "Games didn't mean anything to me. They really didn't. It was after the game that was much more important." So does the documentary kind of have that heart of it where it's like who he is outside of baseball?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you'll see pretty much all aspects of Bob and throughout his life. We kind of look at the film right now as kind of the backbone of the film is the 2023 season. And we just step away from that timeline periodically to talk about, and it kind of ends up chronological where it's, basically, childhood and minor leagues, major leagues, moving on to, being a comedian and then a broadcaster and then, the Hollywood Bob. But that 2023 season is kind of what kind of holds it all together. It's also one of the things I think when we went into this, we knew that there would be baseball in this because how could there not be? But there's actually kind of a lot of baseball in this, and in a great baseball movie way. If you like baseball movies, you're going to love this documentary because the Brewers have been an excellent team over these last few years and exciting to watch. And I think there's been some disappointments, obviously, but I think people will enjoy kind of reliving those highs and lows.
And I want to also say that, baseball really was Uecker's first love. That was definitely what he always came back to. He said of all the things he did, everything else was for laughs, being a comedian, being on Johnny Carson, doing Major League, all that stuff. But what he really loved doing was being in the booth, being around the baseball team and the community.
And I imagine there was a treasure trove of archives to look through. Where did you start researching? Do you have any favorite gems that you came across, whether it's included in the doc or not?
Yeah, we really tried to dig deep. A few places we found were just local resources. I think that was one of the advantages of being a local filmmaking team was that there's a lot of things we could find here locally that maybe a remote team might not be able to find, and connections we have and people we can help us find stuff. It is definitely a lot to work with. There was tons of footage. Our editor, Matthew Prekop, we would just keep sending him archival, anything we'd find online, old photos, audio recordings, baseball. There's so many baseball games too. So we just send it to him, and continually boiling that down and trying to find the nuggets that were great for story and things that people hadn't heard before.
What first started as a 4-hour lunch, I imagine, of course, extended over the years of filming. What was it like to get to know Uecker on an intimate level like this? And is there something about him that you feel might surprise fans to learn about through this documentary?
Well, I mean, it was an amazing experience to be kind of, and they always say, like, you don't want to meet your idols. And in this case, I'm really glad I met him.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry, I get a little emotional actually, but
yeah, no, I mean, he's someone that it's interesting how radio can sort of create a relationship with a radio personality, and for me, for him being in the community, that's how I first originally got to know him, through the radio, and just him always being there. People really find peace and respite from listening to baseball games, and also just listening to Uecker. I think it's not unusual to feel emotional. There's a lot of people know him more intimately than us, but I think it's definitely emotional to just know that he's not going to be back. And it's been a part of our lives. Since I was born, he's been part of my life, basically.
I mean, the access he gave us, even if it was just in the booth, was just amazing to be around something like that. To see him do what he does so well, from 3 feet away was something else. And it's just the way he treated the people he worked with, all his other broadcast partners and things like that, where, he clearly kind of ran that group, but they all had so much respect for him, and they had so much fun too. So it's like, there was no negative. It was kind of what you hoped it would be, that he was going to be this funny, bright, energetic guy somehow at age 90, and he was that. And you really got an idea. I mean, early on, when we talked about doing the documentary, it was like, one of the questions is, why do you keep doing this at age 90? Like, we want to kind of get into that. And very quickly, it was like, well, this was his happy place. And, like, what else would he be doing? So I think he talks about it, and I think that's pretty apparent in the movie also.
Yeah, a true example to follow in who he was. And it's not surprising, your takeaways, but it's so nice to hear that he is what you think he is. And, especially after we've been without Uecker, what do you hope people feel and take away from this documentary?
The interesting thing about Uecker is that he plays everything as a joke, but he actually had a lot of perseverance. He maybe wasn't the best baseball player, but he persevered. He kept going for it. Maybe that sounds like a platitude or something, that like that's what you might take away from it. But actually stepping away, I've heard that note from a few people who've seen the film, and interesting how he just kind of keeps going forward, moving forward, and doesn't fall into things as much as he just works hard. He's a hard worker and disciplined, and I think we could all take something from that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Mm-hmm.
Well, for today, ahead of the Film Fest, Michael and Steve, thank you both so much for joining me today to talk about Uecker.
Thank you, Audrey, for having us.
Thank you so much.
And the pitch. Luke Waddle left and deep. Hey, get up.
Michael Volman and Steve Farr are the co-directors of the new documentary, Uecker. It's premiering at the opening night of the Milwaukee Film Festival this Thursday, April 16th. Standby tickets are available, but if you don't get a chance to see Uecker this week, there will be a wider planned release this summer. Lake Effect is available as a podcast, so you can listen whenever you like. Find it where you get your podcasts and subscribe, download, and listen on demand. Later on in the show, we'll learn how Milwaukee got the nickname Cream City. But first, we'll tell you how the Milwaukee Public Museum changed how history is shared with the first diorama habitat. That's coming up next on Lake Effect on WUWM. You're listening to Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. If you go to a natural history museum almost anywhere in the world, you can expect to see dioramas displaying how animals behave in the wild. Dioramas have become integral to museums, transporting visitors to unfamiliar landscapes through art and science. But did you know that it started right here in Milwaukee? The Milwaukee-style diorama revolutionized how museums curated their exhibits, and the original diorama lives on at the Milwaukee Public Museum. Dr. Ellen Sensky is the president and CEO of the museum, and she joins Lake Effect's Joy Powers to talk about the museum's long history with dioramas.
So when we think about dioramas, that can mean a whole wide variety of things. And yet, Milwaukee has a very interesting distinction as being kind of the birthplace of what we consider the Milwaukee-style diorama and maybe a more action-packed version of dioramas. Can you explain what the Milwaukee style of diorama is?
Let's just go back to that first, what is considered the first diorama, which was the Carl Akeley diorama that he did back in 1890. It was called not a diorama back then, it was a habitat group. He was the first one who actually created this 3D environment with a curved background, 3D images in the front, so those were the animals and the plants, and then it slowly fades to the background where it's a painted backdrop. So that is actually what we now consider dioramas, and he was the very first one who created this. And the reason he did it was he said, we can teach better if people can see the animals in their habitat.
Interesting. When you go to a museum now, you really do expect to be immersed in this environment in some ways. And yet at the time, this was pretty revolutionary. What would museums at that time have looked like in the late 1800s?
There would have been cases and displays called curiosity boxes, and they would have just had, if you had a stuffed bird, it would have been sitting next to maybe some mammal bones or a pot, or, so it would have been objects of curiosity and not with any context behind them. Or you could have a case that displayed a bunch of birds, but none of them would have been in a natural environment. So they would not have conveyed much information beyond looking at a stuffed bird or a pot. And so this was really revolutionary in trying to create a teaching tool that allowed you to learn more just by looking at something.
I feel like now we take for granted that if we see a bird today, there's a relatively good chance that we might be able to see what its environment looks like through a quick Google search. At the time, it would have been much more difficult for people to really get an idea of where this animal lived, how they lived. What's really amazing about the muskrat diorama at the Milwaukee Public Museum is that you get these different kinds of layers of how a muskrat would live in the landscape. Can you describe a bit what that looks like?
Yeah, it's a really interesting diorama in that it is done at the surface of the water, so half of the diorama is below the surface, half is above. And he, interestingly, created this environment where you could actually see what do muskrats do both above and below the water. And so there's the entire habitat above the water, and then what we normally don't see, which is what's below the water. And it's just sliced right through this habitat so that you can see it all. So it really was so innovative at its time.
Now, you mentioned, of course, dioramas have become really the heart and soul of the Milwaukee Public Museum. There is, of course, the muskrat diorama, which is still at the museum, but there are a lot of more immersive experiences inside of that space that are also considered dioramas. When you go to the Public Museum, what are the different kinds of dioramas that you'll see today?
So today you will have the similar ones to the Akeley, but on larger scale, not behind glass. So on the third floor, if you go to Africa or you go around the world, you'll see these open dioramas where on either side of the walkway you're walking through these immersive environments, but you're not right in them, which are those with the curved backdrops where the foreground is 3D that fades into a background that is painted, and seamlessly that foreground fades into that background, giving you this long distance that you're looking at when it's really not long distance. So there are lots of those. There are also the rainforest one where you walk right in and you are surrounded by a two-story rainforest. And so you are right inside the diorama. So, and then we have the little peek through the window, tiny dioramas where you can get a sense of cultures from around the world from the past. So we have many different kinds of dioramas, and it is a museum filled with dioramas.
Now, of course, the Milwaukee Public Museum has a new space that is currently being built, currently being put together. Can we expect to see this tradition of dioramas live on in the new space?
Of course, yes. I mean, that is what we're known for. And so that is something that when we were in the library, when the library was actually half museum, half library, we had dioramas, and we came over here and we exploded those dioramas and did the next best thing. And so that's what we will be doing in that new museum, is those immersive environments that have, some of them will have painted backdrops, some will have backdrops that actually move, so more media oriented, but they will have those 3D forefronts that fade into the background. So those similar things, but in some we'll use technology to create that. In others, it'll be that painted. In fact, some of those backdrops are being painted as we speak. Not in the museum, but they will be in the museum.
And can we expect to see the muskrats in the new museum?
Oh, the muskrat is coming. That's an easy one to move since it's small and contained, and it will be on display in the new museum in our nature connector.
Very nice. Well, Ellen, thank you so much for joining us here on Lake Effect.
Oh, you're welcome.
That was Dr. Ellen Sensky, President and CEO of the Milwaukee Public Museum, home of the first Milwaukee-style diorama, the Muskrat Family Group, designed by Carl Akeley in 1890. Not only did Akeley's diorama revolutionize museum displays, it also inspired a yearly celebration known as the Diorama Rama. Local dioramist Dee Kirschling started the event 10 years ago with a month-long celebration she dubbed National Diorama Month. Kirschling joins Lake Effect's Joy Powers in studio, along with fellow dioramist Angela Johnston-Beyer, whose recreation of the museum's Living Oceans exhibit was featured in this year's Diorama Rama celebration.
What first got you interested in dioramas?
So I am a huge fan of the Milwaukee Public Museum, and they are known for their dioramas, and I have been going there my entire life. And coincidentally, March was always kind of my least favorite month of the year. So I started making dioramas. I had, was kind of bored, and I had bought a pair of shoes around that same time, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to make a diorama. And I jokingly called March National Diorama Month, and just kind of snowballed from there. I've just always enjoyed making them in school and then seeing them in our public museum.
Now, Dee, you said that it kind of snowballed. What did that snowball look like?
Well, one day in a March 10 years ago, my husband, Joe, kind of just said, you should have a Diorama Rama for National Diorama Month. And I said, you know what, you're right. And that's where it snowballed. I had my first one 10 years ago. The theme was Milwaukee. And it was on the last Tuesday of March because that was what the bar that I was having it at, that was the date they had available. And that was 10 years ago. So we've had, we haven't had 10 of them. We've had 8 of them. But it's gotten bigger and bigger every year that we've had it.
What would you say really attracts people to the Diorama-rama? What is it about dioramas that you think speaks to the community?
I think there's a couple of things. We all love tiny things. Tiny things are so cute. And also the Diorama-rama focuses on adults. I love kids, and I love that they make dioramas, but this event is specifically for adults to create dioramas. And I think as we grow more mature, our worlds get a little bit smaller, and we put aside a lot of stuff that we could do for ourselves. So I think it gives people an excuse, in a way, to cut loose and make something that's just for fun.
I would absolutely agree. And as a participant, being able to kind of spend my extra free time creating something where it's just a little bit of an amusement, it's just something lighthearted. And the time of year with things being kind of cold and indoors, it's just been a really nice break from reality sometimes, and kind of just taking my time at the end of every day to just work on a diorama for, an hour. And all the themes that Dee has picked over the years have always been very clever, and definitely it's a family-friendly event, but it has always been really fun to see other adults kind of putting their own spin on whatever the theme is for that particular year. And I would go back to the nostalgia of it from being a kid, and that having that pride in this thing that I created with my 2 hands. Growing up with the Milwaukee Public Museum, I just remember spending hours there as a kid and just wanting to stare at all the different dioramas, but for a long period of time because I wanted to just take in every little detail.
All those nooks and crannies, everything you can see.
The artists just did such a tremendous job of, every little nook and cranny has its own little unique feature. And every time I would come to the museum, I'd see something new that I hadn't seen before.
Plus, they come alive at night.
Absolutely. And as a kid, I truly believed that.
Me too.
I think I saw a documentary about that. Night at the Museum.
Yeah, it's absolutely a documentary.
Absolutely.
So thinking about dioramas, especially for people who are listening to this and might be curious about making their own dioramas, what would you say is the right space to start in? What do you need to start a diorama?
Well, that's what I think is kind of great about creating dioramas for Diorama-rama is that it's such a wide range of people who participate in terms of skill set. And there are people like me who definitely start a month in advance, but there are other people who pick it up the weekend before. And that's what's really kind of great about it. It's like, you pick an idea and you can kind of use almost anything to create a scene that expresses a fun idea, or again, going with the Milwaukee Public Museum this year was such a great opportunity for us to recreate something that we loved as a kid. So for me, I picked the Silurian squids. I mean, I know they're not squids, but and a moldorama for my childhood. Those were like the things that, I just loved so passionately. It was just such a thrill.
I like to tell people to think outside of the box, but it is a classic move to have a diorama in a shoebox. And so we do get many folks that create that as their diorama, and I love it. I am here for it.
Now, Angela, you were mentioning your diorama. I was very impressed by the moldorama. You really made it. If you didn't know it was tiny, looking at a photo of it, you would think it was a moldorama. How do you go about figuring out how to make that kind of piece?
A lot of trial and error, I would say. But, again, it's getting an idea and just trying to see around my house what are the things that I could use to help create this idea. So you'll notice if you look very closely, there'll be things like, oh, that's a straw, or that is the bubble top to an item that I got from the hardware store. That is, again, it's a lot of garbage, but it's just always been something I think that even as a kid, I loved to try to just create these little shoebox worlds, with any sort of idea that I could come up with, and honestly with whatever sort of stuff I had around the house.
I have so many bins in my craft room that are just marked miscellaneous because it's just all little things. I'm like, this might be good for something in the future. You never know.
And a lot of times I'll find a piece of stuff that I'm about to throw away, whether it's the cap for a toothpaste bottle or, just something. And I go, what can I make out of that? And yeah, I definitely can go into a bin and just sit there until I've got a good project and then sift through, what do I have here? What do I see in these things that I have in front of me?
For sure. When you think about your favorite dioramas over the past, 10 years, what are some of the builds that come to mind?
I love them all, and I really, truly do. People ask me every year which one is my favorite. I will say I do have one from a couple years ago. The theme was the 90s, and so it is a Comet Cafe from the 90s that one of the dioramas made, Laurel Sulfate, and it's just tremendous. And she actually let me keep it. I don't usually get to keep the items, but I have that one at my house, and it lights up. I mean, the tiny little posters in the window, the detail is tremendous. It's really cool.
I will concur that is actually one of my favorites as well. But it is one of those things where this might be considered a contest. There's usually a winner, but I think all of us who participate, we don't really think of it as a contest. What we enjoy is being able to see all these different dioramas pulled together in one event, and it's really hard. It's hard to pick a favorite every year.
I love that you are reluctant to call it a contest because I run it, and I don't like calling it a contest. We allow people to purchase voting tickets as one of the ways that we raise money. And I'm going to continue to do that, but it's really hard. I don't know how people vote for their favorite because they're all so wonderful. And I don't like putting an emphasis on winning necessarily because if you participate, you are winning.
Absolutely. And quite honestly, I don't think anybody that participates would be looking to get any sort of particular prize. It feels almost more like a gallery night in a way. And I think most of us who talk about the participation of it usually lead with that it's a great fundraiser.
Very nice. Thank you both so much for joining us here on Lake Effect.
Great. I had a great time. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Dee Kersleen is the chief dioramist at National Diorama Month and the creator of the Diorama Rama event. Angela Johnstead-Beyer is one of the dioramists who was featured in the Diorama Rama. They both joined Lake Effect's Joy Powers. We'll take one more break, and when we return, we'll share the history of Milwaukee's cream-colored brick. Keep listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM.
$1 million on the track. You do the adding and subtracting. Waste some time just to figure out without a doubt that we stacking. Y'all better get a hood respect, cause it pay to play for a day up in my project. My project stick in my projects. Everybody must brag. My project stick, don't come to my projects if you ain't with this car. My project stick in my
This is Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. To close out today's 414-day show, we'll learn about one of the things that sets Milwaukee's architecture apart. Cream City brick, of course. Many of Milwaukee's historic buildings are made of milky yellow bricks, giving the city the nickname Cream City. To learn the history behind Milwaukee's famous bricks, Lake Effect's Excret Nunez speaks with historic preservation planner Andrew Stern.
So the Cream City name developed because of the multitude of cream brick buildings that were found throughout the city of Milwaukee and southeastern Wisconsin in the 19th century. The brick-making industry was very large here, and we had some very prominent businessmen, George and his brother John Burnham, and they had brickyards on the south side of the Menominee River Valley that produced millions and millions of bricks. They really started kicking it into high gear in the 1850s, and then their business lasted in the valley through the rest of the 19th century. Their children ended up becoming brickmakers too. But the brick that was produced there, as opposed to a red brick, was a soft cream yellow color. So when brick buildings were constructed, they used their local brick, and just the multitude of buildings that were going up were cream-colored, and Milwaukee developed the nickname of Cream City based on the number of brick buildings that we had here.
So that kind of leads me into my question of why did the city rely on using these like soft cream-colored bricks for its buildings and not the average red brick?
Because of the clay that is found in the Menominee River Valley and along Lake Michigan, the clay found here is higher in magnesium and calcium. And when that burns, it dilutes the effect of the red iron that's found in the clay. So the clay is fired very hot and it produces a cream-colored brick. And in the 19th century, before the railroads were here, it just would have been really unfeasible to ship bricks. So that was our local product, and we embraced it. We loved it, and it really brought a lot of attention and renown to Milwaukee and helped us develop this identity. People would come and visit and then write home about this beautiful yellow city, and it really kind of helped put Milwaukee on the map as the city was developing.
That's really interesting. And so does its history primarily have ties to Milwaukee, or do other cities in Wisconsin and beyond have a history of its own using these bricks too?
Yeah, so Milwaukee had the largest industry that produced the Cream City bricks, but we also shipped millions and millions of these bricks first to the East Coast, and then later with the development of the transcontinental railroads. A lot of Western cities would use the Milwaukee brick as a facing brick, and there's evidence of a number of the bricks being sent to Chicago following the Great Fire down there. The cream Milwaukee brick was used for a number of lighthouses along Lake Michigan on the Michigan side. It was used for a city hall in Utica, New York. And there's also a funny story from one of the newspapers describing how the editor of the Albany Journal kept a single Milwaukee Cream City brick on his desk for people to come and look at. And the newspaper article was speculating that there would be orders of Milwaukee brick to Albany before long after people see what a fine product it was.
You mentioned what the brick is made of. Is it still used today to build structures?
No, by about the end of the 1920s, a number of factors helped kind of end cream brick production in the city of Milwaukee. Architectural trends had really changed by about the turn of the century. A lot of structures were starting to use marble and stone more prominently. Also, it was easier to get red brick shipped via railroad here, so a lot of red pressed brick was showing up in the city. Also, a number of the clay deposits were just exhausted by about the turn of the century, and the demand wasn't there for it as much anymore.
Fast forward to today, where can these cream-colored buildings be found throughout the city?
Yeah, they are still around, obviously not in the numbers that they once were. It's amazing if you look at photographs of downtown from the 1870s and 1880s, like almost every building you see is a brick building. So unfortunately, the city doesn't quite have that number of structures anymore, but there are some great locations to check out. I would say Walker's Point is a great area where there are a number of large commercial and residential structures that are constructed of cream brick, and there's some really nice warehouse buildings down there that were constructed of Cream City brick. Closer to downtown, the brewery districts, Schlitz Park and then the Pabst Brewery Complex. A large number, if not all of their buildings that were originally part of the brewery complexes were constructed of Cream City brick.
Why is it important for this part of the city's history to be recognized?
Oh, I think it's utterly important that it's recognized. I mean, like I said, Cream City brick really put Milwaukee on the map. It was sort of our badge of honor for a lot of the 19th century, and it's important to celebrate that and work towards preserving those that are still here so that future generations can take a look and be like, wow, that building's been here for 150 years, and it was part of our historic fabric, and just celebrate the architectural history and the industrial history of the city of Milwaukee.
What's something interesting that Milwaukeeans might not know about its history with the cream bricks?
Okay, so it's kind of a weird story. I don't think it's like too morbid or anything, but apparently on the south side of the Menominee River Valley, there was an old city cemetery. It was a pioneer cemetery. And at some point, I believe in the 1860s, and I'll put that in air quotes, all of the bodies were moved to Forest Home Cemetery. And the Burnham brothers, John Burnham, acquired the property to use for brick production. Well, it turns out that not all of the bodies were moved. And there are articles in the local papers of, workers at the Burnham Brickyard discovered another bunch of bodies in the brickyard. And they're removing the larger bones that they can get out of there, but the smaller ones, they're just grinding up to use as brick. And another article a couple of years later that was like, oh yeah, they're finding more bones in the old cemetery, and it quoted an architect being like, yeah, I know that there are buildings in downtown where you can see the bones in the brick.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
I'm like, for people who are not like seeing me, my mouth was like, what? That's crazy.
I guess it gives a different meaning to bricks being the backbone of the city of Milwaukee. It might actually be the backbones of something.
Wow. That was definitely very interesting. I'm not sure a lot of people know that, but
yeah. It's a pretty weird story. So I guess next time if you're in front of a Cream City brick building, it might not be a large chunk of lime that's sticking out of the brick, or it might be, I don't know.
We could speculate.
We could speculate.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Andrew. I really appreciated this conversation.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Andrew Stern is a senior planner of historic preservation for the city of Milwaukee. He spoke with Lake Effect's Grit Nunez in 2023. You can also find a bubbler talk all about Milwaukee's Cream City bricks at wuwm.com. And that wraps up today's show. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. If you've missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at wuwm.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We all know about Smokey Bear, who warns against forest fires. But do you know about Torchy timber loss? We'll tell you about the Wisconsin DNR mascot being brought out of retirement tomorrow on Lake Effect. Thank you so much for joining us on this 414 day, right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.